Welcome to this session. This is a session on entrepreneurship development. And in this episode of our discussions, we will be focusing on the financial management issues which are directly, something that an entrepreneur needs to be concerned about, and he needs to directly oversee these things. Like once the project has been formulated and detailed action has been taken towards development of the project, one very important question comes up: from where and in what way are you going to finance the project? So this particular episode is going to focus on the project finance aspect of the financial management function, and what kinds of financial plans do companies make when they are about to start up a new business. I would say that basically they look into two things. One is finding out what is the total amount of capital required for the fixed assets of the project, which is what in short is called capitalization. And the other is deciding what should be the composition of the capital or the mix of finances that's going to make up the capital structure base of the company. So these are the two areas into which major decisions will have to be taken. And when you're looking at a basic financial plan, this is to suggest an appropriate structure of the capital, which is going to do two things. One, it's going to minimize the cost of capital for the entrepreneur, and is also going to maximize, hopefully, the return to the shareholders or the equity holders of the organization. So let's go a little further and say that any project needs needs funds for two basic purposes. As we said before, one is for the fixed capital financing, and that's not the only one. It also needs a lot of financing for the working capital. That is the day-to-day, how does the company meet with the day-to-day expenses of running the operation? That is to do with the working capital. Now, what do you understand by fixed capital? By fixed capital, what we mean are the funds that are required in order to procure the major equipment and the major machinery and the major things which are going to convert raw materials into finished products.
So we can say for purchasing the fixed assets.
For purchasing the fixed assets of the organization, you require funds, and that is what we would refer to as a fixed capital. Now, let us ask a question to you. What do you think are some of the factors which are going to influence the requirement of fixed capital? Just think, the fixed capital, as Shukanto had said, is required to finance the fixed assets of the organization. Okay. Now, therefore, what do you think are the likely factors which are going to have an impact on the need for fixed capital?
So, nature of business could be one.
Absolutely. First of all, the nature of the business is a most important factor, because see, there are many companies which are capital intensive companies, and there are many companies which are not capital intensive, they are labor intensive. Now, as you can quite easily understand, the more the capital intensiveness of the business, the more will be the need for fixed capital, and because the more will be the need for fixed assets. Okay, that's one. Now, any other thing that you can think of?
So we can also take into consideration the size of the business.
Yes, of course. A corollary to what we have already said, the nature of the business. Another thing is the size of the business, because as one can quite easily understand, big business will require a bigger amount of fixed capital, because they will have more assets with which they will carry on the business. And smaller companies, smaller units will not be able to spend so much, and they will look at small scale kind of operations, and therefore their need for their need for capital funds are going to be lower in comparison to the bigger ones. Fine. Any other thing that comes to your mind? Any other thing?
So how about leasing arrangements?
Yeah, leasing arrangement also. Like it is not necessary that you always purchase the assets that you are going to use in order to carry on the business. You might even think of leasing the assets from other parties who are willing to lease such things to you. And because you are not going to become an owner of that, your investment in that fixed assets is going to be lower, and which in turn will lower the need for fixed capital. Okay. Any other?
So one thing we can say is that the presence of ancillary units to reduce the costs.
Right. See, if the business which is going to be started is thinking that it is going to procure a lot of components and other things from many ancillary units which are there, then it may not have to produce everything itself. So if it does not produce everything itself, and it can source out, or rather outsource, a lot of components and other inputs from other ancillary units which belong to the same entrepreneur maybe, then the requirement of fixed capital for this particular business will go down. We have discussed quite a few things. How about technology? technology could also
So,
play a role?
Like as you mentioned that the fixed capital financing basically depends upon the capital intensive or labor
Yeah.
intensive businesses. So if in capital also we are using technology which is very high,
Yeah.
so I'm sure it's going to incur more cost than any other.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you are going to import technology from outside, if you are going to use sophisticated technology for converting raw materials into finished goods, then obviously such equipment is going to be more expensive, and it will be more difficult to procure and maintain and all that. So your requirement in terms of fixed capital will go up the more the incidence of technology. Okay, and this is a direct fallout of the capital intensive nature of the business, as you're suggesting. Quite truly so. So technology plays a major role. Any other thing that you think is going to have an impact?
So we can also think of provision of subcontract.
Yeah, subcontract. Like we were mentioning, if there are ancillary units, similarly, the company or the entrepreneur might even think that we will subcontract part of the job. We will not do the whole job ourselves. We will do an assembly kind of a thing. We will procure components from other parties, other subcontractors, and we are merely going to assemble goods and sell them as finished products in the market. Then it does not have to depend on too much of fixed assets. So its requirement of fixed capital is going to go down as a result of that. Provision of subcontract definitely is going to have an impact, a major impact on the need for fixed capital. Is anything else that is going to have an impact?
So, like the trends in the economy.
Yeah, of course, trends in the economy. Like every company, has to face the domestic economy, and there are ups and downs in the economy. There are times when the economy is booming, and the entrepreneur feels encouraged to expand the business, bring in new assets and finance new assets, which is going to jack up the requirement of fixed capital. Again, in the times of recession, it might so happen that the company might shelve its plans to expand, and thereby it will reduce its fixed capital requirement. Even the international conditions make an impact on the company's need for fixed capital. How about companies which plan to do business abroad? They will obviously look at the international business market, and they will revise their plans for procuring fixed assets or not, depending on the international market conditions prevailing at that time. Fine. So I think this by and large covers a big gamut of reasons or factors that have an influence on the forecasting of the need for fixed capital. Now then, let's turn our attention to what are the, from where or from what sources can we get such capital for financing our fixed assets.
So one of the most prevalent and easiest ways, like the borrowings from the public.
Fine. So yes, as you all know, that when a company wants to raise funds and a huge amount of funds, then one of the major avenues is going to the public, borrowing from the public.
Sir, another major source is borrowing from the financial institutions.
Absolutely. The company does not always have to depend on the general public to raise funds and deposits. It can even go to financial institutions who are there to extend different kinds of loans and finances to the organizations depending on the feasibility of the project that the entrepreneur wants to put up.
So how about lease finance?
Yeah, that's right. Even lease financing, as I said, when a company goes for leasing, then it has to look out for avenues from where it can take lease of, let's say, equipment or even other things. So yes, there are parties, there are financial companies which are involved in the business of leasing to other companies who want to do business. That's another way of looking at it. Any other source of funds?
So, one more thing is the retained earnings, the profits of the yesteryears.
Absolutely. I mean, it's not always that the company has to look outside for raising funds. There can be funds available within the coffers of the company itself, like the retained earnings, as he's mentioning, could definitely form an avenue from where a company can raise or meet its capital requirement. Fine. So these are the major sources from which the company can raise funds. But then let's go a little deeper into each of these. Let's take up what Vikas was saying. If the company wants to borrow from the public, in what many ways can the company do it? Okay.
So as far as I can see it, there are
Yeah.
three major ways.
Okay.
One is by the issue of equity shares.
Right. The most important and which is very commonly understood, the equity shares. The company can issue equity shares, right? So the equity shares are the main source of finance for a company, and these are contributed by the owners of the company. Do remember that an equity shareholder is really an owner of that organization. Okay. So, in the case of a new company, the promoters must contribute to the equity shares of the company, and then the balance shares will be issued to the common public. Okay. So the promoters, like the entrepreneur himself or the group of people who are going to promote that business, will have to first of all pool in their funds and then go to the public raising equity shares. Okay. This is one advantage when the company raises equity capital. This provides a strength to the financial structure on the base of the organization, and it also enables the company to add debt onto the financial structure. Do remember that the financial structure of the organization normally is composed of two things. One is equity, the other is debt. And what we commonly refer to the debt equity ratio in an organization is something that is very closely monitored by the owner or the promoter of the organization. So let's say when we talk about a 2:1 debt equity ratio, what we mean is that for every unit of equity that the company has raised, it has got within its capital structure 2 units of debt. Okay, and these debts are out of the equity. Okay, they are a different kind of capital that the company has taken on, and they are not a part of the equity. Again, in talking in terms of equity shares, one must mention that the limited liability and voting rights are two important features that are conferred as special privileges on the equity shareholders. Okay, but do remember the cost of equity capital can also be very high. And it also entails a lot of risk. Okay. Fine. We have another kind of shares called preference shares. Have you heard of preference shares? Does anyone know what preference shares are? Preference shares confer on preference shareholders 2 rights. One is to receive the dividend preferentially. That means they will be the ones who will first receive the dividend. And after they have received dividend on a certain percentage, fixed percentage, whatever remains will go to the other equity shareholders. So the obligation of the company is first to the preference shareholders, who will have to be paid the dividend at a fixed rate, and whatever will remain thereafter is going to be distributed among the non-preference share equity holders. Okay. And the preference shareholders can also get back their capital on a priority basis if they want to withdraw from the company. Okay. So this is a special kind of share, preference share, which is given to a group of shareholders, and they are called the preference shareholders, who enjoy these 2 benefits which are not enjoyed by the other equity shareholders. Fine, I think we have spoken something about the financing, project financing. We'll do something, we'll take a short break at this point of time. We'll come back and discuss about other forms of financing after the break. Is this clear what we have discussed so far?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back. Before going into the break, we were discussing about what are the different factors that influence the need for fixed capital, and what are the different ways we could raise money in order to finance the fixed assets, that is the fixed capital. And we talked about a few sources from where we can raise funds for the company. And we mentioned about the equity shares, the preference shares. Let us also talk about some other instruments with which the company can raise capital. For example, debentures are another commonly used creditorship security. Different types of debentures are issued to mobilize debt capital from the public, and they normally carry a fixed percentage of interest, and they are quite secured that way. That's another way of raising money from the market. From the investor's point of view, debentures are less risky and they contribute a regular income. And so during the times of depression, like many a times when the economy goes into a recession or a depression, you'll find that this is a more preferred kind of an instrument from the investor's point of view. This is one major difference which I think we need to appreciate very clearly, that equity shares are far more risky because and when you invest in an equity of an organization, you're not sure that you're going to get the funds which have invested back, number one. Number two, you may not even earn a return on or an interest on the amount that you've invested. So there's a lot of risk involved here. Unlike that, in a debenture, if you are buying a debenture, then you are assured of the principal sum that you have invested, and you are also assured of a fixed rate of return, which may be low compared to what an equity might earn for you. The risk return question is always there. The higher the risk, the higher will be the return, and the lower the risk, the lower will be the return, but then safer from the point of view of an investor. So debenture is one form of instrument that companies can rely on in order to raise capital, but then they are not very attractive from the company's point or the entrepreneur's point of view, because they know that they have a definite obligation of returning the money and the interest on a fixed basis. So that's one. The other thing is you can also depend on term loans which are extended by many banks and financial institutions, and they become a principal source of finance when it comes to a lot of money which the company needs to procure. Loans are obtained from banks and financial institutions, and they are all secured loans. They carry a fixed rate of interest and they are repayable in installments. As you all know, loans, like people have taken loans even as individuals, so we all know what loans are. Term loans, they are significantly different in the sense that they are generally repayable within a period which is a long period of time. Like the repayment period can vary from 10 to 25 years, so it's a long term kind of a borrowing. Term lending institutions generally insist on, because they are going to give you a lot of money for a very protracted period of time, they are going to insist on certain things. Like for example, they are going to insist that the promoter also has to bring in a lot of money into the capital structure. I mean, they will not extend the full amount to you as a term loan if you want to start a business or a new or modernize a business. They'll make sure that you have brought in a certain percentage of the total capital requirement yourself as a promoter, and they are going to extend the term loan based on what is the percentage that the promoter has himself brought into the business. The other thing is the benefit is they offer you a moratorium on the first few years when you don't have to repay the loan. As we said, that the loan will have to be repaid in installments over a large number of years, but then in the beginning few years you enjoy a moratorium. That is, during that period you will not have to repay any installment. Term loans also come with some other strings attached. For example, they may even put restrictions on the appointment of nominee directors. Like if a company is taking a huge amount of term loan from a financial institution, that financial institution can even insist on engaging a nominee director on the board of the company which is taking the loan, so that they are assured that their point of view, their interest is also going to be taken care of by the entrepreneur or the promoter as the business goes along. So these are some of the things that are associated with term loans. Normally let me just quickly repeat what I said. Term loans normally are loans given by financial institutions for extended periods of time, 10 to 25 years normally. They have to be repaid in installments, and the repayment can even be made earlier, even before they are due. However, they carry a fixed rate of interest on them. But then they insist on two things normally. One, the promoter also needs to pool in certain amount of funds in order to make sure that he is serious and the financial institution is not unduly exposed to a risk. The risk is borne by the financial institution as much as by the promoter himself. And they also insist on many a time recruiting somebody or some persons as nominee directors on the board of the company that the entrepreneur represents, so that the interest of the financial institution is not lost on that company. Fine, so these are term loans. Another point I think we discussed is another avenue for borrowing funds could be or obtaining funds could be the retained earnings. Shukanta, you mentioned retained earnings, and you did say, and we all agreed, that retained earnings basically are the reserves and surpluses built up by the company over the several years that it has been in business, if it is an existing company. And these earnings can be reinvested in a business or a new line of business or in a modernization that the company is thinking of currently. Okay, so the cost of retained capital, as you can understand, is far cheaper than the cost of borrowed funds, because here you're not borrowing, you're drawing it out from your own reserves. So you are the cost of that capital is much cheaper compared to external funds like equity or like term loans. Okay, but then these are by no means the only avenues of obtaining finance from outside. There are other means of obtaining finance. For example, deferred credit. Many companies take advantage of deferred credit. Like what happens, there are companies who are doing business with their suppliers and vendors. Okay, now those suppliers or vendors are not paid immediately. Their payments are held up. They enjoy a credit period. The company who buys enjoys a certain length of credit from those vendors or suppliers. Now during that period, the company can make use of the accumulated funds which are actually payable to the vendor at a later date and use it as a source of finance. However, it might be short term in nature. there are certain things called development loans, okay, or capital subsidies which are extended by many state governments. In the case of India, many a time the central government or the state government, or state development agencies are there which extend certain soft loans to organizations trying to give a major boost to industrialization of the backward areas of the state. So if you're trying to set up an industry in a backward area where the government is also interested in making development, there maybe you will get to enjoy certain soft loans extended by, state development agencies, which come with a lower rate of interest and maybe relaxed repayment terms. These are also taken advantage of by many companies if they are willing to set up business which are in line with the interest of the government, the state government or the central government, and set up in areas where the government has a development or improvement agenda. Okay, there are also other things like unsecured loans and deposits. Unsecured loans are normally provided by the promoter. Okay, many a times what happens is the promoters make a contribution to the equity capital. Then they go to the public and raise equity from the public. And in spite of that, if there is a gap in what was required and what has been earned by way of the promoter's margin and the public equity, the promoter can put in more money, and that becomes an unsecured loan or a deposit, which adds to the equity base, and they normally carry a low rate of interest, but then they can be taken back whenever the promoter wants to take it back, because after all the promoter is doing this not as a matter of obligation, but then he's pumping in more of his own funds into the equity of the organization. He can pull it back whenever he wants to. He might be extending it at a lower rate of interest. Such are the nature of unsecured loans and deposits. Fine. So these are, I think, some of the common methods adopted by companies in trying to procure funds in order to finance their fixed capital requirement. Now, the other important aspect of our discussion is how does the company handle its working capital requirement. Okay, we talked about two major areas which require a lot of funds. One is the capital finance, the fixed capital, the fixed assets of the organization, which can be financed in the various ways that we have just discussed. And the other is how does the company procure funds for carrying on the working capital or financing the working capital requirement of the day-to-day running of the business. Now, before we go into a detailed discussion on this, let me ask you, do you know what is working capital?
So working capital basically comprises of cash and bank balance.
That's right.
Accounts receivables.
The accounts receivables, that is the money that the company's, the company has sold goods, okay, and the company gets a lot of money which the buyers owe to the company. Those are the accounts receivable. So which money should come to the company within the accounting year, okay. So cash.
How about inventories?
Right, inventories also are a very important component of the working capital. What are inventories? What are the items that constitute the inventory of a manufacturing organization? Can you think of the items?
The stock of raw materials.
The stock of raw materials, okay.
Stock of finished goods?
The stock of finished goods. Also the amount of, the in-process goods. Stores and the spares also make up a part of the inventory. So just quickly, recap what we have said. We are looking at working capital, and some of the most important items or components of the working capital are the cash and bank balances, the accounts receivables, the inventories in terms of the raw materials, the work in progress, the finished goods, and also the stores and spares that are available with the company, and also the advances paid by the company which are recoverable. Okay. Do remember these, when we talk about these items, they make up what are called the, what are these called? They are not fixed assets. They are current assets. They are cumulatively called the current assets of the organization. Okay. And why are they called current assets is because they are fairly liquid in nature, in the sense that
they can be convertible into liquid cash.
That's right. These items which we have just spoken of are very easily convertible into liquid cash within an accounting year. Normally that's taken as a time frame. Assets which can be converted into liquid cash within one accounting year itself are loosely termed as the current assets for the organization. Fine. This is gross working capital. But what is net working capital?
So the current assets means when the current liabilities are subtracted from the current assets, we get
Right.
net working capital.
Right. When we subtract the current liabilities from the current assets, then what we get is a net working capital. Okay. And what then are the current liabilities?
So
All
the
those
accounts
claims
payable-
that are payable within the same accounting year. I mean, we were talking about on one hand the receivables in one accounting year. Whatever needs to be payable within one accounting year are termed as the accounts payable. So if you subtract the accounts payable from the accounts receivable, and that should normally be positive, the difference needs to be positive, then that's the net working capital. Okay. So this is the working capital. In other words, the working capital is the amount of capital required by the enterprise to carry on its day-to-day operations. Okay. Now you require a lot of finances to carry on the day-to-day operations, and where will these come from? So this is what is going to form our discussion when we come back in yet another episode. We will look at what are the different types of working capital and what determines working capital and what are the likely sources of obtaining money or finances for financing the working capital requirement of the firm. So this is where we stop, and I hope I have been able to give you some ideas about the financing aspect of the company, at least in terms of the fixed assets, and what we will discuss in another episode will be the working capital requirement of the organization. Are you clear about all these issues?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much.